Hey guys, welcome to part 2 on what the lower body does in the golf swing and what the hips, the knees, the legs, they all do in this downswing part of the golf swing. Now, if you haven't already, check out video 1. This will describe what we're looking for in the backswing, but this is going to be the meat of it. What are we doing with the lower body? Now, going back to the start of the video, what is the function of the lower body? What are we trying to do? Well, it's one of the primary pieces that moves the low point ahead of the ball to allow us to hit not only good shots and consistent shots, but some of our best shots. There's no good player in this world who doesn't hit that ball first and the ground second consistently. If you didn't do that, you would be one of the average golfers at the golf club, the poorer golfers, even the beginners who have the most frustration in making good contact with that golf ball. So now let's take this, and we've got to the top of the backswing, and now we're looking to start into this downswing. Now, what we find from good players is that they have a bigger shift towards the target than the poor players. Now, most videos on YouTube are going to tell you that you need to turn your hips. Turning is part of it, but I would say most golfers are damaged by the efforts to try and turn more in the downswing, and I would say that's probably not the key piece you need in that downswing. What would be? Well, if we look at the best players in the world, if we look at some of the best players in the world, many of them are starting that downswing before the backswing is even finished. And by doing that, what they're doing is they're starting the hips to move towards the target. And this is both sway and turn. Now, we do need to protect the body, and we definitely don't want to try and separate this lower body and get it turning much, much quicker than the upper body, because that's going to put some pressure on the lower back. But we definitely want the ability to get that lower body to move towards the target, because it's going to move the divot ahead of the ball more often. Now, what we'll start to see is by the time that the left arm is level to the ground in the downswing, that about half of the leg has moved towards the target. So if you take the width of your leg, you divide it by 2, it's a good guide of how much you should have moved that lead leg towards the target in the downswing when you're looking on video from the front. Half a leg forward by the time the left arm is level to the ground in the downswing. Now, where does this come from? It comes from between the knee and the hip, the femur. The femur is moving more towards the target. And this move, like a pouncing cat, tends to look like the left knee is ahead of the ball. So the first part, we're looking at sway. Now, the second part, we already spoke about how the hip may be a little bit more extended at the top of the backswing, but now it's going to return back into flexion. Don't get me wrong here, this is not a squat. We don't need to go down, 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 down. How much? That's going to impact how consistently we can hit that ground. This knee flex at the beginning, which may be 20 degrees, yes, we lose some of that right leg flex in the backswing as the right leg straightens, and we want to regain that flex. Now, I will not deny that some of the best players in the world increase the amount of flex that they have. Would that be the model that I prescribe? I think for most golfers who hit the ground behind the ball, what are you trying to gain from that? If you want to add distance, there's a lot more that we would do before trying to go down this move of bend the knees and push out the ground, because that's the most chaotic when trying to hit the ball first and the ground second, when we're changing where the head is and the axis of the golf swing. If you imagine a big circle that's orbiting around my head and I start lowering that because I'm trying to knee flex, I need a lot of skill and a big element of luck to hit that ball consistently on a regular basis. And I would assume that you're not hitting 200 to 500 balls per day like many of the professionals get the chance to do. So we've got the left leg moving towards the target. We've also acknowledged that the pelvis is returning back into some form of flex, and the knee bend is going back to its original 20 degrees, albeit it's moved a few inches more towards the target. Now, what about the hip turn? Well, if you do what I've just said, you'll find that you've probably got the hip turn that you already need. We've gone to the top, we've swayed towards the target, and we've regained the knee flex. If we've regained the knee flex, it's now very difficult for that pelvis to be a long way off. It could be, but it's going to be pretty close, because in getting both knees flexed back to its original state, albeit a little bit towards the target, that hip is going to be pretty close to level to the target by this point. Many of the golfers that don't feel they have enough turn, and I will agree that many of the golfers don't have enough turn in the downswing, would still have that right leg a little bit too straight, maybe moving their weight into the toes, and finding it very difficult to get back towards the target. And the real key that they needed was to regain that knee flex and keep their pelvis back in flexion to get them bent down, rather than the pelvis being extended, which may be called early extension, the weight being moved towards the toes too much. And then from this position, it's very difficult to try and get that lateral movement. So what I'm saying, we're not trying to squat to do this. I do acknowledge that the pelvis will flex, the knees will rebend, and we will shift towards the target, but we are not trying to deadlift. We're not trying to do that. It's just too wild in trying to hit that ball first, ground second. Just brush the ground, swing and brush the ground if you want evidence of this, and then start bending the knees and trying to do it. It just becomes wild. You'll see that you're hitting the ground everywhere. But it does keep me busy in golf lessons trying to fix that, and that is completely fine too. But if I want to make you better at golf, that's probably not something I'm going to add to your golf swing. So now we've acknowledged that we've shifted towards the target. By regaining knee flex, we've got some of the hip turn. And now what you'd be looking to do from here is, because we're not trying to swing too far to the right, we're not looking for a swing direction to the right. If you imagine the hoop we're swinging on, we want it to be relatively in line with the target. So now that we've regained this flex, we will feel that the weight starts to push a little bit more into that left heel. Now, as we do this, you'll notice that I'm also trying to extend that left leg. So I'm pushing in a way that my left hip is going deeper. And while I do that, I'm starting to push the hips forward, tucking the hips and squeezing my backside a little bit to give me the extension into the through swing. So by regaining knee flex, that is putting in some steepening piece to the golf swing, and by extending the legs and pushing the hips forward, that is a shallowing piece to prevent us from just digging the golf club into the ground. Also, the extension is a bit more of an outward force, and it's a speed component to help you hit the ball higher, longer, and with a golf club that doesn't keep descending into the ground. So we've regained knee flex, we've moved towards the target, and at the last checkpoint, we'd got about half of a leg towards the target. Well, from halfway down until impact, we're going to move another quarter of a leg until we get about 3/4 of a leg ahead of the ball. We're going to get about 3/4 of a leg ahead of our original position, and then extend up. Now, because we've got that left leg turned out, this is going to be very easy to stay in this position. And what we will find is, because the left leg is straighter than the right leg, we're actually still in some form of tilt on the pelvis too. So it's not completely straight at this point. If you do look at Tiger Woods, a little bit more injured these days, you'll see that he stands up a lot more in the golf swing. And when we are in the backswing, one thing to completely be aware of is we don't have a need to lift that left knee, because part of the problem by lifting that left leg is that if we start to lift that left leg, we lose some of the side tilt that we had in the pelvis, which is going to make it more difficult for the shoulder tilt. So if you are somebody, for flexibility reasons, who's trying to lift up that left leg, I would say you would be better to replace that movement by making the right leg go deeper rather than the lifting of the left leg, because that can impact the shoulder tilt and the head movement, which can also jeopardize the bottom of the golf swing. So now we push the hips up. Now we're into a taller finish. We're extended with the chest. And as we look at the right heel will be down. Now, the reason the right heel would be down is because as we sway, we get a banking effect to this right foot. Yet if we're somebody who doesn't sway very far towards the target but turns excessively, we'll tend to find that that right heel kicks out. So if you're somebody with a little bit of a wild right knee action and right foot action, more sway, more pelvis flexion will keep you back. Not just sway, but pelvis flex and hip sway. When you're practicing, you can draw a line on the right knee, and as you swing back, you don't want to see that right knee go outside of where it began. Not only will that cause the pelvis to move too much towards the ball because it's extending too much, it will make you shank the ball. Or if you're more skilled than that, you may raise the handle so much that you hit the ball out of the toe, which is a good save. Now, one other piece of advice I have, Tiger Woods once said he didn't fire the glutes, and there were a lot of jokes about that. In that, you will find that as your practice session starts, it's probably a little bit harder for you to extend the legs, especially if you're a little bit of an older golfer. You'll find it a little bit harder to straighten the legs and push up the pelvis. Make that one of your warm-up techniques. As you take these swings, straighten the legs, push up the hips. Now, you don't need to go straight into full shots. You can start with these short shots, straightening the legs, pushing up the pelvis. Just keep doing that. I would say you're a more warmed up golfer when you've managed to get your hips pushed forward, your ass tucked, and the legs straighter. Many golfers, like we say, are trying to work on flexing, but they never really had the extension in the through swing anyway. So by flexing more, they are only adding to their problem. Let's start to train in good pushed forward hips to help hit the ball higher, move the low point further forward, and hit those baby draws that everybody's trying to achieve. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. It's quite an in-depth video on the lower body movement. I think a lot of people have problems with this, especially the early extenders that don't quite understand how to get that pelvis back in flexion. If you've learned something, please share in the comments something you've learned or a little gem from this video. Like, comment, subscribe, and help the algorithm for me. Guys, if you've enjoyed this video, please check out some of my other videos. There's a great video on the backswing about common mistakes that I see amateurs make in the backswing. Strongly encourage you to go check that one out. Maybe watch it 2 or 3 times, because every time you watch it, you'll typically pick up 1 or 2 more pieces from that.